I've been thinking about this bidding war that I saw a few weeks ago at auction. It wasn't a dramatic bidding war. It wasn't frenzied. It wasn't hype. It wasn't all the things that we'd seen before, but it made me stop. And honestly, because we're in November, we're nearing towards the end of the year, because this is the time of the year when I start reflecting and asking myself things like, okay, how do we close this year well? And how do we start preparing for the next year? What mattered this year that's going to carry us into 2026? We have to ask those questions. And that moment at that particular auction, during that lot, that bidding war really stuck with me. And then it put me in this really reflective action. I wasn't necessarily shocked by what happened during this bidding war. I wasn't overwhelmed by it. It didn't make me want to call someone and say, oh my God, did you see this? Because it made sense. It captured the tone of this entire year. It had a very certain quietness, a certain carefulness, a certain intentionality, and this certain calmness. It was a mirror almost to what we've seen come from 2025. See, I think that this year was very loud, and that could be contrary to what a lot of other people think, but I don't think it was loud in the way that it once was. It wasn't one of those hype years where everything was just screaming, where every other week there was a headline about a record-breaking sale. Now look, there were some years during Dear Glory, this YouTube, that I was covering new auction results every single week because it was that mind-blowing. Because those years, the numbers were so loud, the auction numbers were so insane. The market was so loud. Collectors were loud, galleries were loud, artists were loud. Everything was moving really, really fast. And it felt like artists were breaking through left and right. Collectors were getting invigorated, excited about a market, spending way too much money. But that wasn't this year at all. 2025 offered these little signals, these quiet signals, if you were paying attention, if you slowed down long enough to just take the temperature. And if you didn't take the temperature, if you didn't take the moment to just take the temperature, it didn't matter because you felt the shift anyway. So as I started preparing to close out this year, the one question that just kept coming up for me is, what kind of market did we actually just live through in 2025? Because if we understand this year, we'll understand exactly how to move with clarity as we walk into 2026. If you're new here, welcome y'all. I'm Mariah Elise, and this is Dear Glory, where we talk about the art world in a way that's grounded and real and more than anything human. And if you want the deeper version of what we're doing today, that's the reflective worksheets, the guided voice notes, and also this full 30-day challenge that we're going to be doing in December. I'll tell you all about that later. To prepare for 2026, all of that is going to be happening inside the Glory Collective, which is on Patreon. Building Glory, Mastering Glory, that's where the work happens. That's where we go deeper. So a few weeks ago, I was watching this replay from Christie's London, and Peter Doig's Ski Jacket, which is a painting, came back to market after nearly, I believe, actually 20 years exactly. And I'm not going to sit here and act like I've been tracking this painting forever, because I haven't. Okay. The only reason this painting matters to me is because it's one of those moments that helped me read and understand where we are within this market. It's one of those moments that reiterated where we are in this market. So what caught my eye about this painting was the provenance. This thing comes back after 2 decades, and bidding opened at £4 million. And there was no chaos. There was no type of frenzy in the room. There were no gasps in the room. It was a very slow, very intentional, almost inward kind of energy within this room. The bidding war lasted 13 minutes, and it was a lot of wealthy confidence, I would say. Most bidders weren't even in the room, okay? They were on the phone. So of course the room was filled with, you know, how they do, the mouths covered so no one knows what they're saying to their client. A lot of soft voices, a lot of patience, a lot of deliberation, all of that. And after 13 minutes, it hammered for more than double the estimate. And I remember thinking, yeah, that's exactly what 2025 felt like. It wasn't fast, it wasn't flashy, it was careful, it was aware, it was intentional, it was measured. And this was the moment that made me sit down right here at my desk, open my glory notes, and start reflecting on the year. Now, look, I'm not always the numbers first person. I like the story, the context, the behavior, but even I have to admit, the numbers always tell a story. And the numbers told a very clear story this year. 2025 was not a boom year, but the most important thing is it also wasn't a crash. What happened this year was a whole lot of recalibration because the blue chip artists, in a sense, stayed stable. We're not talking about explosive sales, but we're talking about stability. The mid market, it was a little uneven, but some rooms was live. A lot was happening. Some rooms were heavy. Okay, emerging artists were still moving, but far more thoughtfully, a lot slower. And this is the part where I want to remind us, this kind of recalibration doesn't just happen in the art world, because after the vid, we watched whole industries go through the exact same thing. We're talking about retail brands expanding too fast, then they folded. We're talking about tech companies hiring aggressively, then having to lay off thousands and thousands of people. Beauty brands took millions of dollars in VC money, and then they shuttered because the foundation just wasn't actually stable. I'm talking restaurants had explosive years, then crashed and closed as soon as all of that hype loosened. It's all the same pattern. When you have a boom, it's always going to expose what wasn't built on clarity. And 2025 was the art world's recalibration year. This year, I believe, truly is going to set the tone and has set the tone for the next few years. Now, we can't talk about this year at all without talking about the gallery closures. And y'all, there were just way too many closures in 2025. And most of them were mid-sized spaces. I'm talking about those galleries that had real commitment, real artists, real programming, and a lot of passion for what they were doing. But they were carrying, and I've talked about this before, in my opinion, they were carrying so much weight. They were carrying these fair fees, shipping costs, staff, rent, all of that. And the market just wasn't moving fast enough to justify the burn rate like previous years. Some of these galleries made public announcements when they closed, but most of them just closed. Maybe an Instagram post just to let their people know. But really, one day you pass by the gallery, it was there, and then the next day it was a dark window. And the truth that I believe sits in all of that, these galleries didn't close because of lack of talent, because of lack of vision. It was about capacity and clarity. If a gallery didn't know who it was this year, and they didn't have the capacity financially to create systems that actually lead to an ROI, then 2025 exposed that. This just wasn't the year for chasing every single opportunity and applying for every fair and signing every artist and mimicking whatever trends were going on, which there weren't really many trends that happened this year. But this wasn't the year for burning yourself out trying to keep up with the art world. Honestly, this was a year to know who you are. You needed to know who you were as an artist, as a gallery, as a collector, and you needed to know what you carry. You need to know what you serve, and you needed to move from that place. Clarity, in my opinion, in a way, became the currency of this year, and I believe it'll be the currency going forward. And it's not just the art world, it's every industry. This year forced everyone to get real about where they really are. And that kind of leads me to sales, because sales told a story. And I want to start with Kerry James Marshall, because he already holds one of the most important auction records in our lifetime. Pastimes, who sold for about 21.1 million. And this year, he didn't break that record, but his market stayed really, really firm. And in a recalibration year, firmness is what really matters, right? Firmness is what really continues the tone. And in May, his Lost Boys, aka Black Owl, sold for $2.59 million at Christie's New York. And then in November, Sotheby's estimated another work between 10 and 15 million. And that tells you something. He didn't need any of that frenzy that happened a few years ago. He didn't need any of that chaos. He didn't need any of that hype. Serious collectors still showed up for him. They might have been quiet, but they were confident and they were willing to spend. Then you have someone like Julie Meritu, which her record sits at 10.7 million. And she didn't break that this year either, but her 7-figure works still did very well. They were quiet and they were steady and they were deep inside the serious collector circle. And that's what mattered this year. Here's what I'm saying, okay? 2025 didn't celebrate all of that extra noise, okay? This wasn't a bull market at all. This wasn't a bear market either. This wasn't Wolf of Wall Street. This was 2025, and it celebrated substance and it celebrated depth, and people weren't bidding to impress the room. They were bidding, they were collecting, and they were acquiring because they believe in the artists. They believe in the practices, and they believed in longevity. They believed in the works that have history, or the works of the artists that they believe are on the trajectory to creating historic moments. And I want y'all to know, a lot of the real activity does not happen publicly. If you guys engage with this channel, y'all know that everything isn't a public thing. A lot of the real activity this year, even on the auction level, didn't happen publicly. When the market gets quiet like it's been, people buy quietly too, okay? Now the fairs this year told us one of the clearest stories of all. Smaller booths, sharper selections, more narrative-based presentations. Collectors were not rushing. They were not walking slowly either, okay? They were talking. They were asking better questions. Those red dots that we like to see, they were not appearing in a cluster like they used to. They were not appearing in the first hour. They were showing up across the days, day 2 and day 3. And look, we're about to approach Art Basel Miami. And I don't know that Basel's gonna reveal anything. I don't know. I think we already see what 2025 is. I could be wrong, but we could see some explosive things just because of the hell of it, just because of what Basel kind of represents. But I think 2025 is what it is. I think 2025 is going to continue to reveal a year of intention, care, depth, and real conversation. Another thing I think we need to really take a focus on is the curators, because they set the emotional tone of the year. They are in the studios longer. They're being more patient in their writing. They're more intentional in their exhibition building. They're more careful. And that's going to carry, okay? Because a lot of these shows that are being curated have been curated. They're being curated for 2026 and 2027. They're being thought about right now. So the tone of the curator is going to carry into years later. It's not going to, 2025 doesn't remain 2025. 2025 carries into other years because planning for other years, that's happening right now. I can guarantee you that the curation will be more careful. There will be a lot more listening. Curators are not going to be chasing the buzz. They're going to be chasing resonance. And you can already feel that everywhere. But I think in the coming years, you'll feel it more as a reflection of this year. Now, when it comes to artists made some of the biggest shifts that I've seen this year. And I think it's really, really good. This year was a year when artists asked deeper questions about their own practice, about the art world. What do they want to say? They're asking, what do I want to say? What's actually important? Who am I? What am I building long term? They're searching for more clarity. They're being more intentional, and they're also having more intentional visibility. They're setting better boundaries. They're having stronger work. These quiet years bring artists back to the center. And 2025, I believe, did just that. These quiet years sharpen voices. The work is going to get clearer always when they feel that the world is still. And I think also one of the most important things is collectors found their eye again. They slowed down because it's not all of that hype. Collectors shifted. Because people weren't buying fast this year, they were buying right. collectors followed other collectors and they slowed down and they got more intentional into their practice because their collector friends did. They started asking the right questions, okay? They weren't buying so fast. They were asking, what moves me? What aligns with my values? What do I want this collection to mean in 20 years? They were asking those philosophical questions that you should be asking when you're building a specific type of collection. I really feel that this year collectors rediscovered curiosity, and that's really good for everybody. Conviction collecting really replaced hype collecting, and people bought what they believed in. And that's something that I can over appreciate. And I can't talk about all of that ecosystem without talking about the dealers for just 1 second, because they felt this year in a very specific way. Dealers sit right in the middle of this ecosystem. They sit between the artists, between the collectors, okay, between the fairs, between the curators, the institutions, and they feel this pressure from every single direction. And in a year like 2025, they became the emotional translators of the market. And I say that because this wasn't a year where dealers could just place any type of work. They had to protect their placement. They had to protect themselves. They had to think long term. And they had to ask, is this collector aligned with where the artist is going? Is this artist aligned with this collector? They had to ask themselves, is this fair worth the risk? Does this sale build the story, or does it fracture it? A lot of people don't realize how much of an emotional roller coaster, how much emotional labor dealers carry. This year, they were managing slower collectors, artists needing reassurance, galleries tightening budgets, curators working further out, institutions delaying decisions, and shipping costs that just felt higher every single month, partly because of tariffs, partly because the whole world was just more expensive. Dealers moved very carefully this year, not because they were necessarily scared, but because they were paying attention, because their businesses, or the collapse of their business, really relied on how they moved. They had to prioritize relationships over transactions. They had to lean on the collectors that they trust. They place works quietly, often privately, like most, but they were protecting not only their careers, but the careers around them. They were protecting value. They were protecting alignment. And I want to say this too. Some dealers found their voice this year through all of this chaos. But I'll also say this year taught a lot of dealers manners, and it showed how others just don't have them. Some overpromise, some ghosted, some disappeared, some stretched themselves way too thin. But the ones who moved with integrity, you could really feel it. 2025 revealed who understood the season and who was still trying to move like it was 2021. Dealers felt the recalibration very early, and the way that they adjusted told us a lot about where the market is actually heading. And look, with all of that, we cannot ignore the political climate, because 2024 was an election year, but 2025 was the year that we actually lived inside of the result of that election. And the emotional temperature of the country really shifted. And people were watching, people were careful, and people were just a lot more selective. And historically, anytime there's a rise in nationalist rhetoric, Black artists feel it, queer artists feel it, immigrant artists feel it, and anyone whose work holds a mirror up to the culture feels it. And I'm not saying that's always in sales, but in the tone of the room, in those pauses, you know what I mean? In that hesitation. And 2025 didn't scream politics. 2025 was very microaggressive. The art world really felt it. And economically, I believe everyone felt the ripple effects of increasing tariffs too. Shipping costs rose, import costs rose, cross-continental galleries relationships got tighter, and galleries that had cross-continental galleries closed, and any gallery operating on these thin margins, they felt all of that instantly. And while we're talking about the larger climate of 2025, we also have to talk about AI. So many things happened this year that felt threatening, because this year AI stopped being a headline and it started becoming a pressure, because it just became more real. It became a cultural pressure and a creative pressure and an economic pressure. On one side, AI made content faster. It made images cheaper. It made ideas more accessible. And it made people ask the question, if technology can generate something that looks like art, then what are the artists for? And you could feel that in the ecosystem, the pushback, the anger, the resistance. And collectors asked deeper questions about authenticity, and curators dug deeper into intention and material. And museums prioritize works. Some museums actually showed AI, but others prioritize works with history and context and narrative. But then you have this other part of the world. It's like, hey, let's open our ideas up to this. But because you can't automate meaning, and artists felt this emotional side of AI the most. Some felt extremely threatened, but some felt really curious. Some felt overstimulated, but some felt needed, because the art world was being flooded, because the world, not the art world, the world was being flooded with images, and still are being flooded with images and videos that have no soul or no memory and no body behind them. So AI didn't replace artists in 2025, but it did expose why artists matter. It made people value the human hand and the lived experience, the long-term practice, the imperfections, the slowness, the narrative, the labor, the craft. And it made people say, okay, I can get an image anywhere, but I can only get the story, this perspective, this witness from an actual artist. And that's something the market really, really responded quietly to, I believe, and didn't erase the need for art. It clarified the need for artists, and markets move on emotion. Look, we talked a little bit earlier about how dealers found their manners, but I think the ecosystem found its manners, and some parts of the ecosystem just really lost their manners. But one thing I noticed this year is a lot of people found their manners. Artists really communicated clearly. Collectors asked thoughtful questions. Galleries showed up for their artists, and curators slowed down. Okay, museums are actively deepening their programming, but I also saw people lose their manners too. Collectors were ghosting artists in galleries after long conversations. Curators were overextending themselves. Opportunities dangled in your face with absolutely no follow through. And emails were going unanswered. Promise shows never materialized. Look, years like this reveal a lot of character. And it reveals who's going to actually move with integrity, even when no one else is watching. And it also reveals who moves with care only when it benefits them. 2025 showed both. Quiet seasons reveal character, and it's going to always reveal who actually has character worth paying attention to. And look, and while all of this was happening, I was reading the room. Okay, I was reading the room in my own way too. And so that kind of leads me to talk a little bit about Gloryland 2025, because it was a turning point for me. Gloryland happening this year was definitely intentional. And I knew this was a clarity year. I knew it was a setup year, a year where the ecosystem really needed somewhere to gather, somewhere to learn intentionally, somewhere for them to learn, to talk honestly. And the fact that people flew in from all over the place, from everywhere, the fact that the energy was grounded and thoughtful, the fact that people received so much, the fact that the conversations were so incredibly rich, that told me something. We're building something very, very real. And with Untitled Art coming to Houston, with institutions paying attention, with this community that we're growing here, it's really clear that us, Gloryland, wasn't just this event, right? It was a signal. 2025 cleared the ground, and 2026 will plant the seed. And clarity years make room for new visions. 2025 prepared the ground for Gloryland. 2026 we're blooming. Quiet years always set up the next season. 2025 was the setup. 2026 is going to reward the depth, not the noise. 2026 won't ask you to get bigger. It's going to ask you to get truer. It's going to ask you to get deeper. It's going to ask you to get clear stories, aligned partnerships, intentional choices, real direction. And if you build with clarity now, 2026 won't surprise you. It's going to meet you where you're supposed to be. 2026 will reward clarity, not volume. So go truer. Don't go bigger. Go truer. Go deeper. So with all of that, I want to invite you guys to the Glory Collective on Patreon. And I want to invite y'all to stay connected and start applying the things that we're learning here and we're talking about and we're exploring together on this channel, and go even deeper into that. We have 3 tiers. Starting Glory, I would say, is the gentlest space inside the Glory Collective. It's where you stay connected to the work that I'm doing and the work that I'm planning and the work that I'm thinking through. And it also gives you just enough structure to begin activating the ideas from every single Dear Glory episode. This tier isn't about being overwhelmed. It's really about that clarity. It's about grounding, and it's about staying close to the conversation without having to commit to anything too heavy. Inside Starting Glory, you're going to get a weekly voice note before every single episode drops, just reflecting on why I created the episode to begin with. So it's this expansion. You also get my behind the scenes thoughts and intentions and the early ideas that shape each week's video, reflections that help you understand what to listen for as you're listening to these videos. And you also get a guided worksheet that helps you activate the video towards your own practice or your own collecting journey. Now, these worksheets in Starting Glory, they're lighter, much lighter than the Building Glory tools, but they still give you a place to think and to respond and to reflect and to make the video that you're listening to on YouTube meaningful for your life instead of just watching. This really helps if you're looking for that clarity, if you want to move with that clarity, but you want a soft place to think and you want small, consistent guidance that helps you process what you're learning, but without the commitment of deep strategic work. It's a starting point, and that's why it's called Starting Glory, because it keeps you grounded and it keeps you connected, and it also helps you start applying the ideas in a way that feels natural and manageable. Building Glory is applying the work through the tools and through practice, because Building Glory is where we take the topics from Dear Glory and give you guided practice so you can actually apply them to your world. Now, this is not a learn more section, okay? This isn't as soft as Starting Glory. This is a apply more. In Building Glory, you're going to get guided voice notes, reflective exercises, weekly worksheets, and weekly frameworks for alignment and for research. You're going to get visibility tools for understanding gallery. You're going to get tools to understand galleries, to understand curators and institutions. And also this month, you'll get the full December 30-day clarity challenge. And this is going to help if you want structure and you want to be really prepared for 2026. You want application and you want to put these ideas that you have into your real life, into your real career, into your real collecting journey. Now, this works for artists, for collectors, for curators, anyone who really wants that clarity through practice. Okay, so let's talk Mastering Glory. Mastering Glory is you getting very clear with me during a one-on-one. Now, this is the tier where we work together directly, where your questions become our intimate conversations, where your next steps become clear because we take them and we take the time to shape them together, you and I. Now, you're going to get everything in Building Glory, but you also get a one-on-one monthly session with me. You get the space to ask your questions directly. You get personalized clarity around your next moves, support in applying the videos that are happening on YouTube and the worksheets that you can do in Building Glory to your situation with my feedback. You can also get feedback on your artist statement, on your CV, help building your career map, which is just an understanding of where you're going to be in the next 2 years and how to get there as an artist, as a collector. You get strategy that meets you exactly where you are. This is going to help if you want that partnership with me and you want that tailored clarity and you want support in building your artist statement or mapping your career or sharpening your story or making thoughtful decisions as a collector or as an artist. Mastering glory is for the person who really doesn't want to do it alone, who doesn't want to guess. And it's for the person who wants clarity that they can feel and a plan that they can really trust to put into action. This is where we get clear together. So to just make it simple, starting glory is for you to stay connected. Building glory is for you to apply the work, do the work. And mastering glory is for us to build it together, build it with me. Now, I won't have a video next week. I am taking Thanksgiving week to rest and be with my family. But when I come back on December 4th, we're talking about the galleries that we lost in 2025, why they closed, and what that means for 2026. And all of December, we'll be preparing for 2026. So make sure you guys are subscribed and make sure you guys have that bell so that you are notified when I drop a video, because December is important. We need next year to be go mode. Okay, so make sure you guys join the Patreon so we can do this 30-day challenge, get ready for 2026, and make sure you guys are here watching these videos, listening and going back and forth with me in the comments, because it's time for us to be in go mode and get ready for 2026. It's time for us to collect the way that we want to collect. It's time for artists to have the career that we want, or at least go in that direction and not waste next year. And again, I want y'all to already be thinking about Gloryland for 2026. Mark your calendars. This year was a setup. Next year is the next big step. And I want you guys in the room. I cannot wait for you guys to hear some of the conversations that I'm already putting together. And yeah, let's go. Let's do it. Thank y'all for watching. Thank y'all for being here with me. And thank y'all for being a part of this. Glory is a process, and you can't get to the glory without the story. You need the story to reach the glory. Okay. So I'll see you guys in December. Let's go. Let's get ready. December is go mode. December is time to buckle up, get ready for 2026. And for those of y'all that are in the Patreon, signed up there, I'll see y'all in the Patreon.